just after lunch, so there needs to be a little more energy in the room, and especially the topic that we're talking about, right? We don't want to be irrelevant for tomorrow. So I'll go again. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session. My name is Muninder Anand. I've added a K as well, so Muninder K Anand. I head up CCL for India and South Asia. Going with the theme of the SHRM conference, which is win, I guess each one of us wants to be a winner. With that, I'd like to introduce you to a concept, which is a CCL concept of DAC, which is direction, alignment, and commitment, which is everything that we need. Our leadership solutions at CCL are deep-rooted into research. Everyone's aware of the 70-20-10 principle when it comes to development journey. The glass ceiling, they find the roots into CCL research. So that's who we are. The second piece is building leaders for tomorrow is definitely an agenda for us at CCL. We do a lot of research in this domain, and the topic that we have for today is in the center of our main core theme of preparing leaders for tomorrow. I really look forward to the panel discussion on that subject, and I'd like to request Sunil to take the discussion forward.
Hello. Yeah. So first of all, thank you for finding the time for this dialogue. I know there are several competing sessions, so tip of the hat to the folks who walked into this room. And I'm guessing the topic is interesting and relevant both. What I heard, so I'm a researcher. Recently when I was interviewing a CHRO, what I heard was that HR has something called a cobbler's shoe syndrome. So we'll go and do everything for the organization, do it well, we'll know how to engage people, recruit the right people, make sure the right people are walking into our doors, getting trained and all of that. Most of the time we get it right, but we rarely do anything for ourselves. So in this session, I'll not be talking about what we can do for the organization. This session is for us HR leaders. Our careers, managing our own careers, managing how we are preparing ourselves for the future and so on. So we wrote a piece earlier this year which we called CHRO 3.0. You can download the study from the website, which talked about how irrelevant HR is increasingly becoming in the overall context. We've spent 2 days talking about VUCA-D, so I'll not talk about that. Think about the business models that are changing. Think about the changing expectations that the CEO has of the head of HR. And you are living that world. So I'm sure you have several examples of how your world is getting rocked. So we've curated a young panel, younger than me panel. Muninder connected me earlier. So we've curated a young panel to try and understand what are they doing to prepare themselves for the future. What are they doing to prepare their teams for the future? Because my hypothesis is, as a researcher, unless we do something, the HR function is going to become irrelevant. We will still be there 10 years down, but we may not be as relevant as we are. Case in point is, increasingly the CHRO positions are going to business leaders. Increasingly, 4 out of 10 global CHRO positions are going to business leaders. This is not only happening in the West, it is happening here in Asia, literally. And we just heard a presentation from Shrikant, who was a CFO stepping into a CHRO. So clearly somebody is eating our lunch. We need to do something about that. So, let's put our hands together one time for the panel before I shoot a couple of questions to them. So I was telling my panel that I just have 2 or 3 questions. The pudding will be in terms of the dialogue that the room has with the panel. So let me shoot a couple of questions that I have for the panel, and then I'll open it up. Within the first 15 minutes, I'll open it up to the room. So let me start with you, Leena. If you think about your own journey, and if you think about the function that you've witnessed over the last, let's say, decade, what's changing? What's making you worried about the future?
So my journey, interestingly, I also did a cross-functional role in sales. And then when I worked with Aon Hewitt, it was actually a BD role. It was, of course, content as well. So I think that does teach you a bit about what your customers want. And I think that is the most important thing, if you ask me. And when I worked in consulting, I realized that customers are often not articulate about what they want. You have to dig it out. And if you want to dig it out, you have to be in trenches with them. You have to understand their challenges. And for that, I think, it's important that HR does participate in meetings which are business related, understand the nuances, understand how they work with each other, and then, take it forward. So what I see changing is this increasing thought around, let's chase something which is happening in industry outside because it seems to be like a best practice. Most often, people try and replicate that in their organization without understanding the context of that organization. And that is one big worrying factor that I have. Second one, I would say, is also without understanding the business, unless you understand the depth of the business, it is very difficult for you to come up with the right solution. And you may want to move fast because, you see the symptoms, but you're not doing a deep-rooted analysis of what really the challenge is. And unless you grasp that, you will not be able to succeed, or you will actually end up losing credibility. So that's the second thing that, I worry about. And the third one is, this need to do strategic stuff without winning the operational credibility from your business. Operation pretty much is hygiene. If it's not there, nothing works. And, often, sometimes you have to win the credibility of leaders by just attending to their operational needs first, and then getting on to do the cool things you want to do in HR, which sound, also glamorous, and, everyone gets attracted by that. But, I think let's put that in the back burner and attend to the operational challenges that we have first. So.
Okay, so three things I heard. One is customer centricity and the need to do that. I'm guessing over the next 10 years, the world is going to get more complicated. Going by the presentation this morning, the CEO at Raymond, he mentioned that we'll see 99% of the changes happening in the next 10 years. We've just witnessed 1% of the changes in the last 10 years. So I'm guessing that world will become more complicated. I also heard business expectations of you may be changing. So understanding the business as we go ahead and implement not only strategic projects, the so-called strategic projects, but also, being execution oriented. Arjun, you want to comment on this?
Well, as far as I work for National Skill Development Corporation, and the first thing that I shared with the CEO, he says, "What are you going to bring to the table?" I said, "We are, in a way, the largest HR function in the world." Okay, very frankly, while most organizations train a few thousand people or a few hundred people, we train about 6 million people. Okay, and to manage an ecosystem like that, one needs to do some things which are absolutely paradigm shifts. So I told him, I said, one of the things that we'll definitely do, all the innovation will either come from you or it'll come from HR. And we will give you some cutting edge stuff which will impact not only our organization but the country. And we are actually working towards that. So the good thing is, a lot of the problems that we are solving are very HR related. So the business problems are HR related. So we get called in by business that how would you have solved it? And I think that makes things far more interesting. And very frankly, we as an organization are thinking very differently, though we are about 49% government. Most people, when they say, "Oh, you work for the government," and they come to our office, and I can assure you, it's probably amongst the top 3 offices in the country. And then they say, "Oh my God, you work for the government." And I think that's the first challenge that we're trying to also bring about, that it's changing the branding as far as is what we are doing. Because typically you view even government setups in very different ways. So one of the things that we're doing is, we as HR are inviting other HR folks and saying, "Listen, tell us how we can solve the country's problems." So we more than welcome startups to say, "Listen, we want to listen to you and figure out what can be done, because if we don't do it, a lot of us will become irrelevant." that's really things.
So let me come back to you later to talk about technology and HR. You know, that's one area where HR seems to be worried the most, because HR is not considered friends with technology, you know. So that's one area where I'll come back to you and get your comments. Mandira, quick comments about what's rocking your boat.
Let me say this. When I started my career in HR, I was advised by many well-wishers to say that stay on in an organization long enough to start a process, see it through its success, and then reach a point of redesigning it. And that's where the learning cycle will complete. And I was like, hey, how long will that take? 5 years. But in today's date, that 5 years is probably literally like 18 months, maximum 2 years. And I think that's what's worrying me is at this pace of change, do we have it in ourselves to really innovate, question, and move away from a process mindset as soon as we need to? And part of that is really being able to co-create solutions with the business and not walk in as the experts with knowing that, okay, this is how things need to be done, but really have that impact by even having a point of view. And that's again something that worries me, because we've heard enough about the need for org design, revamps, etc. But the real impact can happen where you have a point of view on where the business needs to go and have that kind of dialogue with business leaders. And unless that happens, I mean, we'll not be able to rock the boat for sure.
Yeah, tell me, how far are we away from having that point of view on business as an HR community? Is it a jump we can make in HR, or will it take another 2 decades?
2030 is just 13 years away. So I think I'll just say that if we don't do it now, then to your point earlier, that we'd be, somebody else will be eating our lunch. But I think the shift is definitely, the trends are all there. In terms of org design, simply, I think the biggest and most interesting insight on org designs is not removing hierarchies anymore. When we say we want a flatter organization, it's not simply to do with removing hierarchies. It's to do with, okay, how can we create team setups? And we've got a process in Coke where we've started something called agile teams, where it's about fluid and free information exchange of ideas. And the best experts come together, regardless of which market they're managing, regardless of which business they're from, which geography they might be. It's about really who has got the maximum impact to make to the problem statement at hand.
Okay, thank you. Rajeev, sorry, go ahead.
Something, you talked about process. And I think, we need to really think that does one process work for the entire organization? Look at, how customer centricity is taking stage when we are looking at apps, when we are looking at customer solutions. How when you are going to Amazon, you're looking at, things that you've liked before popping up. There is world of opportunity when we look at our own teams and our employees there that way. But, we still are stuck with, this is one process and I'm going to rule the entire company with that one process. Do we need to now look at different processes, looking at the maturity of the different teams within our own companies? Maybe, those are things that we have to start thinking about before, it's too late. So I just wanted to add on that.
Rajeev, what about you?
So some things have already been discussed. Quick 3 points. What is changing? One is the wave of IT and digitization that is really changing across the world. It's not necessarily in one organization or the other. And my view is that HR as a function is lagging behind significantly. So there is a gap that needs to be bridged on that. That's a way we need to ride it as a function. So that is one. The second is, how do we become marketing managers to create the employer brand, the employer value proposition, and create those experiences to employees in the organization? So that's the second ask, which is becoming very, very prominent. A small miscommunication, a wrong communication by a HR manager in an ITS company gets viral on social media. We really have to be very careful. How do we preserve the brand? And how do we improve that? The third is the expectations from the leaders of businesses. They are going up. They're saying, how are you measuring yourself? What is the measure of effectiveness? How are you creating value? That's something which has always been there, but it's at a heightened level. So to my mind, 3 things: IT, customer experience and brand experience, and the expectations from business. Those would be the 3 key points from my side.
Thank
Thanks.
you. And to Rajiv's point about bringing the employee or the customer in the equation, basis our research, we see the one title that is increasingly emerging for the CHROs is Chief Employee Experience Officers. So at a regional level, I see that. I'm hoping that is happening in spirit as well. And not only the business cards are changing, but the mindset is changing as well. But that's where the HR function is going. That's what the CEO is expecting the HR leader to do. So one more question off the panel, and then I'll open it up. Maybe I can start from the other side now. Rajiv, biggest gap, just one gap, biggest gap in terms of our capabilities, what are you doing about it?
Yeah, so biggest gap to my mind is the first point, which is if we have to deliver employee experience, how we upskilling ourselves. And I'll talk of myself. I find myself lacking significantly on creating digital experience. So younger team members, specialist team members who can help me develop personally, and I'm saying on a personal note, at a team level, engaging them into this digital journey, very, very important. Creating a team which is really able to do the integration of technology and customer experience, having that kind of team, very important. And thirdly, for them, and for me as well, I will never say the journey is complete, how do we immerse ourselves in business and therefore get so much aligned with business that you are able to understand, and when you articulate your HR solutions, they make sense to business. They find them value adding. So those would be the topics from my side.
So Mandira, gap, and what are you doing about it?
Okay, the first gap that I want to talk about is HR meeting science. So we all have typically an art versus science debate about a lot of disciplines, but I think going forward, this is going to be the biggest gap where there is so much data and insights available, especially in some structured, researched and unstructured formats. How do we really layer in a meaningful conversation out of it? How do we differentiate good data versus bad data, good research versus perhaps not relevant in my context research, and empower people with insights that could be meaningful and could be game-changing. So empowering people through insights using an art and science balanced approach. What am I doing about it? I think one example that I'd like to give is of the regular talent reviews that we have. And we not only look at, of course, people's career records, etc., but we also see the impact of the decisions made by the leadership team over time. So, for example, if we are identifying top talent, where is that top talent sitting? What is their readiness over a period of time to move into even higher jobs? So, starting to use science, and most importantly, I think Leena cautioned us about it, but testing it and experimenting it in our approach. So even when launching a new performance enablement process, there were concerted experiments that happened with business leaders signing up for it, and only when the results of the experiments were promising is when it was decided to launch a process. So data, validation, testing, and then co-creating with business.
Thank you. So, during our research, we asked the CEOs and the CHROs, how should HR approach data? Now, HR is not the best friends with data either. So, what does HR do about data? What we heard from the CEOs, and I'm talking about the regional heads of business, is that HR has a very weatherman approach to data. So like a weatherman, we know our numbers. We know what is the attrition rate. We know what is the engagement score. We know how the compensation benchmarks for our teams. What we are not good at is combining those pipes of data and telling a coherent story. So can I combine 5 sets of data and tell a coherent story, assuming that the data is clean? What I heard from CHROs while doing that research is that the job that HR has is to ask the right questions. They need to ask the right questions. They don't need to send their entire team for a 3-day jaunt for learning analytics. It doesn't work that way. The only person who benefits is the consultant who's running that workshop. So leave the expertise in terms of analyzing data to experts. Ask the right questions basis the pipes of data that the HR function is generating. So that's my 2 cents on data. What about you, Arjun?
Well, very frankly, I've been a data guy for the longest time. But frankly, I don't think the answers for the future lie in science or in data. and I'm making a very provocative statement, but the answer lies in art and creativity. Uh, all the jobs these days which are getting taken away by automation, and we're looking actually really far into the future. We experimenting with a lot of things. If you come to our office, you'll be pretty blown away. Uh, but very frankly, anything which is scientific, I can change into a process, and I can then actually replace it by robots or a certain process, or make it automated. So in my opinion, the answer very frankly will not come from data. While we may be collecting a lot of data, a lot of the jobs are going to get taken away, but you know eventually it'll be just a few people looking at that data, because jobs are not going to be there. Who you're going to manage? So there isn't going to be HR, in my opinion. uh, Again, very provocative, but the focus, I think, needs to be on looking at things, that how do we use art and creativity and innovation at the workplace to actually create game changing things where new jobs and new opportunities get created. And I don't think a lot of uh, work is being done in that area.
Also, quick follow-up, Arjun, for you, since you are talking about it. One of the things we learned in our research is that in 10 to 15 years, organizations will look very different. So there'll be a core group of generalists who will sit within the organization, and then the specialists will be all freelancers. That's where the organization is going. The question for you is, are we prepared? Is HR function, or whatever that function will be called, are we thinking about managing such an organization?
So let me give you an example. I have an organization where we have 6 different kinds of employees. 6 different kinds. So we have employees, we have short-term consultants, we have full-time consultants, we have project management units, which are like from KPMG and Ernst & Young. We have interns, and we have outsourced employees. So does that, we're already doing that.
So what is the chaos you are creating? Or how much chaos are you creating?
Well, okay, so let me give you an idea of the sort of people that are working with us and the sort of talent that we're attracting. So that will also probably blow you away. We've got in a bunch of 300 people, we've got about 100 from the Ernst & Youngs and KPMGs and BCG and all of those. So all very talented and very, very accomplished people. Then we've got about 6 doctorates. We've got 90% are postdoctorates. Sorry, not postdoctorates, are masters. We've got people who've come from Harvard, Princeton, Oxford, LSC. The guy sitting next to me, he's spent 15 years in Goldman Sachs, in Europe, headed businesses. That's the sort of people that we work with.
Thanks, Arjun. You're making a lot of assumptions. Being a researcher, I can tell you that. But nonetheless, point taken.
So, a gap that I see is the fact that we tend to pretend and take a lot of pride in thinking that we know it all on behalf of our employees. And often it's not true, on behalf of our managers even. So, it's important to ask. The world is asking every consumer on what you really want. But, are we doing that? When you talk about employee experience, are we understanding? I would even go beyond co-creating with business. Why can't we even think about co-creating with employees? And, you will not get these ideas if you do not keep time for yourself to invest in understanding not just what is happening in HR, but what is happening around the world. Because, HR is part of a business. It's not separate from a business, right? So you have to understand how these changes around you are impacting, and how, therefore, it would impact your organization. And, therefore, what should you be doing? So keeping time for reflection, asking these hard questions, challenging your assumptions are very, very key. And if you keep doing that, I'm telling you, you'll be in good stead. So that's the gap I see, that we don't often step back and think about issues.
Yeah, one quick comment here. When we were doing this research, CHRO 3.0, I would encourage you to download a copy of that. We heard very similar concerns from CEOs, and how CEOs were articulating is as following. HR either plays a doctor role or a helper role. So in most organizations, I would say 99 out of 100 organizations, HR plays a helper role. We do our annual processes, roll them out really well, do a good job at it. But after that, we wait for the phone to ring. When business needs me, they'll call me. Versus 1 out of 100 organizations, in my research, we looked at about 100 companies, we found just 1 or 2 organizations where HR is playing the role that Leena is talking about. Going out and understanding, like an eagle trying to look at, have a 300 feet view, and then stooping in and picking up practices and trying them out in your organization. And not rubbishing practices just because they come from another industry. It works for FMCG, it will not work for my company, I'm a bank. Only 1 out of 100 organizations are doing that. And that's what I call a doctor role. Opening it up to the room, questions? Burning or otherwise questions?
Thank you. This is Anil from HCL. 2 quick thoughts and question. One to our Aisha friend Rajiv. You talked about immersion in business. I, as HR and talent development, advocate that every HR employee should compulsorily work in delivery or operations for a period of 30 days to 90 days in a year, every year. Do you agree with it? And is the future, Leena, I read Global Head HR Quality, R&D, Talent Management, dash. Is this what we're going to see 13 years from now? I mean, are we consolidating departments into one tower head? Is this solutions or just from the fun side? Thank you.
So the first part of your question, the answer is yes. And in fact, only incidentally that I was telling my colleague today that we must have some kind of movement from HR into business and vice versa so that we learn. In any case, you realize that all management trainee schemes across all organizations, they necessarily have business stints. So therefore, it is understood, perhaps it's a matter of, do we have bandwidth to release people to go into other functions and do some rotations and come back? Thanks.
So, we did talk about this in the previous session as well. I think what has worked well is managing a COE along with having a generalist role. Because again, going back to what I was talking about, in a COE, you often don't, you tend to sometimes, go deep and lose the user experience. So if the user department is HR generalist, then I wear both hats, right? So I have to think about my solutions saying, okay, will the HR BP be able to run this if I'm not around? If not, then how do I help? How do I simplify the process? So that's the reason why I think this model is working well. I've been in a COE, I've been in HR BP, and as Yash was mentioning in the previous session, you do keep having quarrels, which I think is not happening so much in our organization because we have both the hats that we wear. So maybe it's the future, I don't know, could be.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of the things we realized in the study is that the HR function of the future will be sitting at the intersection of different functions. And why do I say that is because if you are expecting HR to play the employee experience executive role, think about what a customer experience executive does. He gives one experience to the customer and manages all the mess at the back end. That is where HR is going. So the HR leader not only needs to know about HR, he needs to know a bit about finance, needs to know a bit about legal, about IT, and so on and so forth. That's where the future is.
Hi, good afternoon. Because this session is a lot about provocative questions and statements, I want to ask one question, and I hope not to be thrown out of this room. And that is, we've been, hearing continuously for the past 2 days that HR needs to understand the business. So one approach is where HR understands the business, and second approach is to sort of handpick line people who could make good HR professionals and, give them that kind of a grooming and make them good HR professionals. So you come with a talent who already understands the business and would have better credibility. So if we were to sort of look at that approach, of course, being a part of the HR community, I would, stand to lose my job also, you never know. But if we were to do that,
what are certain capabilities we should look at? Because here we can't look at functional capabilities because they obviously do not have those functional capabilities. Question one is, what capabilities should we look out for? And how should HR sort of sell this concept to, let's say, a business and to the, target audience of the line people of, hey, guy, you demonstrate good HR capability, so why don't you come on board?
Thank you.
So
And
two questions.
who wants to take that? So I'll give you my 2 cents, about it. It's already happening. What we need to guard against is that the blind people coming to HR for the right reasons. What is happening is HR is seen as a soft role. I don't want to. I want to take it easy for a few years. Let me go and join HR function. Yes, so that already is happening. That flow is happening. I would love to hear if what are the skills we want to see, and what can we do for HR executives to go out and run business and come back.
So if I may, the skills that, and I'm saying everyone will have different filters of skills. For me, there are only two broad skills. One is ability to listen, synthesize, analyze, which is all about mental capability, which is not analytical, which is not only emotional, but a fusion of the two. The capability of the mind to be able to do something worthwhile. The second is all about influencing. If you have to be successful, a huge amount of influencing needs to happen. So in my mind, and I'm sure there must be as many views on this subject as many people are there, but these are two very, very fundamental for success.
And therefore, skills our CCL research teaches us that most executives should have, in addition to influencing skills, in addition to communication skills, it is self-awareness and learning agility. Can you learn quickly? Because you cannot expect to learn analytics, because after 10 years, it'll be AI, it'll be VR, it'll not be analytics. So you need to learn how to learn quickly and creatively. That is where the world is going.
Can I just add one line to that? It is, of course, the ability to learn, but for people who are making these shifts across functions, etc., it is the ability to sometimes unlearn and then relearn. And I think that trilogy would complete the skill set required.
We can have a few more questions. Yeah, can we have the mic there?
Hi. Hi, am I audible? My name is Abhinav. Sunil, you mentioned some time ago that we should leave the data to the data scientists and focus on our processes. I feel it's in the same line as saying leave the finance to financial analysts or finance function. But no, we as HR, it's extremely important for us to build the financial acumen to be able to support business. In that same light, I want to question that what do we do to build the data analysis acumen? What are organizations doing? So within the HR function, the ability to understand and comprehend data more, and also the ability to understand digital more, because if these are things of the future, what are we as, some of the best practices the organizations are doing to build that in the HR function, please?
Okay, so I think the first is the digital bit. I'd answer that. So there's a lot which is happening, which I'd say, so firstly, I'm a marketing guy in HR. So for all the people in the room, and I've been an entrepreneur and I've worn different hats and then jumped back into HR. So the first thing that I'd say is you need to have a very good understanding of how technology is going to be used for social media, for branding. And actually, very frankly, I look at the talent acquisition function as a marketing function. And if you do that right, you'll attract the best talent and you'll be able to engage them. The other thing that we're going to be using a lot of technology for is engagement. And I think we haven't even come close to touching the tip of the iceberg of what digital can do. So just to give you an example, all of what we are designing right now for our employees, because we are now in many different states, my first focus is that we must do everything which is focused on touching their lives first, and then anyone in the head office. So to your point on employee experience, interestingly, that's what we are focusing on as well. right from the time someone's going to apply, and don't go to our website right now, it's a disaster, okay? But in time to come, we'd be touching and finding out everything about what potential talent and how we can engage them throughout the journey till the very end. In fact, even learning, we're trying to create in a manner where everyone's learning is individualized and it's on the go and in the cloud, and wherever he is, he wants to learn whatever he wants to learn. And it's not only that, because you're doing finance, I'll give you access to only finance classes. You may want to learn photography, I'll let you learn that. And that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Arjun. Last two questions. Can we have the mic here and the gentleman there?
I don't know whether this question is going to create the right kind of an impact, but I just wanted to ask this. As an HR, we've been talking about technology, we've talked about data, and I've been last 2 days getting to know that we need to be aligned with the business. I completely buy all that. This is absolutely required, and I think that's what we have done over a period of time, all of us, somewhere or the other. But my question here is, how are we as a fraternity of an HR working towards the emotional quotient which is required for us to run in the organization? I think somewhere or the other, because the business tell us to do certain things in certain manner, they want us to deliver certain things. I think as a fraternity, we need to have this conscious efforts of maintaining the emotional balances that we need to have while we're doing our work. I really want to understand your thoughts on this.
So all the tough questions go to Arjun.
No. So the interesting thing is that, in fact, none of our education ever focuses on EQ. Yeah. Okay, so I wouldn't even have to go all the way till our careers. And I actually have started reading this very interesting website called the School of Life. Okay, and I highly recommend it to a lot of people. It really talks about how do you bridge relationships, how do you work at a marriage, and how do you, for example, be better at work, how do you be better with teams, and none of that is ever taught to us. You assume that you're going to learn it. Okay, so I don't think HR can suddenly or has the onus of doing it. In fact, the education system probably needs to change, because a lot of what is happening today is the number of people who are committing suicides, the rates of depression are going up and will go up because of so much automation. And if all that is happening, you've got to ensure that you're building an ecosystem where you're able to listen to them. So something very nice I heard was 2 ears, 1 mouth. Just listen, mouth, keep your mouth shut.
That's a fair point, but how do we do this for ourselves? That's really how I'm reading that question. And very simple things that you could do every day, which really helps you. When you're driving back home, you're going back home, I always reflect on how the day was. What did I do well? What did I not do well? Is there somebody that I spoke to I shouldn't have spoken to like that? Those are reflections that you have. And sometimes, I would pick up the phone and I said, look, I didn't mean it this way. It came out badly. Small stuff like that makes a lot of difference. The second very easy tip is, if, you know that there is certain thing, going on in your mind, just forecast, because it just prepares the other person that what's happening. So I think that's how you manage your own stresses and balances. And that's really worked for me. So, very easy tips that one can deploy around that.
So self-awareness is what she's talking about, and that's something that we all need to sort of get better at, HR or no HR. One last question.
I'll ensure that Arjun doesn't take the mic this time. So, I just want you to respond to this topic of the session from a plant HR perspective. And the reason I'm asking, my two colleagues here from the plant are going to kill me for asking that. But every time when you talk of all that we've spoken so far, they seem to hide behind the ER blanket. We are stuck in ER. And so how is this going to, these kind of changes and all, impact the plant, and how? Because from my understanding, the expectations of the employees, are, more or less remain the same. But we are, not waking up to that. That's
okay.
So, if I may start, there is, in my mind, except for the fact that there may be unions and union negotiation and therefore all the dynamics associated with it, that's the only difference between our plant HR and others. Apart from that, if we think of employee experience, ensuring that employees are engaged in thinking future, thinking strategy at a plant level, it may mean kaizens, it may mean some basic things. But the fact is, in my mind and in my practice, I wouldn't differentiate absolutely anything with respect to two groups. And plant HR must equally think of themselves as HR, not as employee relations, unless they are dedicated to the cause of union negotiations, and which is a different ballgame. So no great differences.
Okay, so short, if you keep it
Yeah,
one sentence.
I will try that. Okay, I think what we need to really do is to move to a spirit of entrepreneurship. I think whenever we talk about that word, it's really very, very in relevance to business. I am not sure if in the context of HR, if we really use that, whereby I say, I own the problems and the issues or the development in the organization. And hence, it's not that only when business comes back to me and says that, okay, I've got an issue, can you help me sort that out, is when I really step in. I think the first big step for HR to really be relevant is to be entrepreneur. In the true spirit, and that's the only place whereby before the even business comes and tells us the problem, we say, you know what, hey, I've already figured that out. We know this is the issue and this is what we can do about it. So I think that's how
Thank you. That's the doctor approach that I was talking about. So thanks for pointing that. So one quick comment, one sentence each, advice to next generation leaders on how they should prepare for the future. One sentence, starting from Leena. You want to? Sorry.
Learn. Okay. Yes. Not sentence, word I used. Word. Yeah.
Technology, and marketing.
I think have a broad vision of where you want to take your organization, and then start with that kind of an approach to talk to your business leaders.
And all that I wanted to say has been covered. So therefore, perseverance. Persevere even with your brightest ideas. They may not be accepted at first go. Continue. Be at it. You'll be successful.
Okay, thank you. So being a moderator, I get the last word, I guess. One of the things we learned is that don't start thinking about skill set building when you think about preparing for the future. It's more about how you think about your role, how you think about collaboration with business, how you think about partnering with the stakeholders, how you think about learning new skills. So I would say my only advice that I learned through the research we did was don't jump into skill building immediately, because that's the stock answer I get when I ask people, what are you doing about future? Hey, I put my team through this XYZ program. Start changing the mindset, how you think about HR, how you think about your role, how you think about what you need to do from 8 to 5, 365 days a year. So with that, let me thank the panel. I learned a lot. I'm a researcher, so I love to sort of pick up new trends. I hope you learned too. Thanks, Rajeev, Mandira, Arjun, and Leena. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Muninder. I'm sure we all know the answer of what we can do about this. So the second phase of the question, we've got the answers. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, CCL, Center for Creative Leadership, for this session.